Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. I've had a number of requests on how to identify chains and what type of chain you use on different saws. And so there's actually quite a bit to it. So we're going to talk about the types of chains and the sizes of chains. And then I'll show you some of the saws with the different types on it. The latter part of the video, I'll actually have some documentation showing the different parts of the chain and how to identify them and whatnot. And then for the next week's video, we're going to do on the, this is all the chain that is currently in use, and we'll do the chains on the ones that are obsolete. So anyway, there's just kind of a compendium. I don't have all of them out here. So the first thing you want to do, if you're missing a chain and you don't have any idea what you're looking for, you need to look at the bar here. Most bars have a marking here. They have the part number, and they tell the gauge, which is the width of the opening here for the chain to run in. And it'll also tell you how many drive links to use for that particular application. This one unfortunately has nothing on it. And the other way, on your clutch drum, if this has one of these replaceable sprockets on it, it says right here 3/8 7-pin. That's the most common type. And if you don't have that and the drive teeth are part of the drum, it usually has a part number, and a lot of times it'll say what size chain it uses on it also. So if you don't have a chain, you'll need to figure out the width here. And that's 63 gauge. So the most common are 50, 58, and 63. And that's the width of the drive tooth on the chain. That's real important that you know that. Then, if you don't have any idea, you'll just have to get some bulk chain and put it on there. Of course, you want to run your adjuster all the way back and then run it and then see how. Then have to have a chain made for it. But the most common types, smallest is 1/4 inch. And I don't have any up here because I only have 2 saws that have it on it. And the next size up is 325. I don't have that up here either. I have a saw that has some on it. And then there's 3/8 low profile. And then there's standard 3/8. And then there's 404. And those are all the common sizes that are used today. So that's just the basics. The next thing you have to know is what type of wood you're going to be cutting, because the teeth can be different on them. So what I use is round tooth chisel bit, almost exclusively because of the type of wood I cut. That's what it is the best. It's also skip tooth, so that you have 2 links in between every cutter. That's what's referred to as semi-skip. And then there's full skip, which is used mostly in industrial situations, big trees. It'll have 4 links between them. And the reason for that is that you want to have it so that if you're cutting a great big tree, in between the teeth, they can rake out the sawdust so it doesn't jam up the chain. If you have what they call a full house, which has a tooth on every section of it, they'll bind up and cause problems, overheat and whatnot. So there again, you have to know what you're using it for. And then on top of that, like I say, there's round tooth. So the cutting tooth is actually rounded and comes down like this. And there's also square cut. And I don't use square cut because I grew up using round tooth, and it's the most available and it's the easiest to file, but it's not the fastest cutting. But for us homeowners, it's not a big deal, because I recently did some tests to see how the difference of the different types of chains that I have and how fast they cut. And then there's also one chain I don't have any experience with, There's a new chain that's put out by Stihl. It's called Hexa. It has a hexagonal shaped cutting tooth. It takes a special file to cut it, sharpen it. And they say it can be in perfect conditions up to 10% faster than this type of chain that I'm using. So I did a timed on all the cuts I did on an 86-foot tree, and to see how much the difference was, and I would save 40 seconds. To me, that's like, who cares? But if you're a pro, of course you want to be cutting the fastest. And so anyway, the other thing that you have to do to identify them is you measure the distance between 3 rivets. Like that. And then you divide that in half, and that'll give you the dimension you need. So, like I say, there's a 1/4 inch pitch, and then there's 3/25, 3/8, and there's 2 3/8. There's 3/8 low profile, which this is here, and regular size 3/8. And then you have your 404, which is the biggest. And the difference, like I say, there's lots of differences, but most of them are unimportant unless you're a pro. And Stihl has come up with some really weird ideas, like the 325 pitch chain. It's virtually identical to the 3/8 low profile, but the tooth is narrower. And the reason for that is that you can, modern saws run at a higher RPM than the old saws like I use, and so it'll cut good and fast and clean. But if you put a regular 3/8 chain on it, it doesn't have enough horsepower or torque to cut worth of crap. So that way they can sell you a crappy saw that runs really fast and use that little bitty chain on it. The only good thing is it does cut clean, but to me it's just a nuisance. I have no idea why they did something that silly. And then the new hex is there again. I'm sure that's for professional use only, and it might make a difference if you're out there. Every tree you cut, how fast you cut it's gonna make you a buck or 3. But there again, I'm talking about the homeowner use here. So anyway, I'll get some saws up here and we'll talk about it some more. Okay, well, here's one of our favorite little Poulan 25s, branded as a skill saw. And this has a 1/4 inch pitch chain. The reasons for 1/4 inch, why it came out in the first place, is for basically unskilled cutters. It doesn't have much kickback. The teeth are real tiny, so it's a lot less dangerous to use than anything else. And the saw doesn't have to be that powerful to cut with it because the teeth are so tiny. And for cutting brush and just fiddling around, limbing, things like that, it works great. And almost went extinct. And they brought it back because Stihl and others have brought out new arborist saws for in-tree work. And they like the idea of a really thin cut and a nice clean cut, so it came back from the dead. But for this old homeowner saw stuff, it's not much. I don't hardly use it. But anyway, we'll go on to the next size here. This has a 325. And there again, like I say, it's for homeowners, for high RPM saws. And the teeth are quite narrow on it. Cuts nice and clean. It doesn't kick back as much as 3/8. And this is the actual safety chain on this one. And I'll talk more about that when we get through the saws here. But it's amazing. This isn't my saw, but I decided I'd work on it for someone. And it's one of the worst saws I've ever worked on. It's amazing because I get this little Stihl 031, and it's a whole lot better saw. Guess everybody makes mistakes, and this was a big one. Okay, well, the next chain size we have is 3/8 low profile, and the pitch there can be usually 50 thousandths on the drive spike on the bottom of the chain there. That's made for modest horsepower saws like this, the little John Deere 40V. It's a nice smooth running little saw, but it's not super powerful. It's just kind of a medium power saw. But the combination works real good. It's really easy to file there against round tooth chisel bit. And on this one, this is a full 3/8 chain here, and this is the most common chain of all. And this is what I use exclusively. Full chisel bit, round tooth. And like I say, you can get it in square tooth if you want it to cut a little bit more. There again, that's more leaning towards professional use rather than homeowner. And the square cut kicks back more, so this is just kind of a nice combination of really good cutting. And one thing too on this chain is it's real easy to file, and in dirty wood and stuff it actually works better than some of the other saw chain. So anyway, and then talk briefly about how you identify the chain type and size. This was a new still bar I put on here. It has the part number. It tells you it's 3/8 pitch. It shows down here is 50 gauge for the drive teeth. And then it tells you it's 66 drive links, so you know everything you need to know to buy a replacement chain for it. It makes it real easy. So a lot of the older saws didn't have that information on the bars. Okay, now here, this is 3/8 again. The last saw doesn't have a skip tooth, so this is what they call semi-skip, or most people refer to as skip tooth. So they have a couple of links in between each cutter, and on softwoods it keeps the cut clean, doesn't bind up and stuff. This is what I use almost exclusively. This is just really the best all around. And there again, it's really easy to file because it's round tooth. And this big old monster here, it's got 404 skip tooth on it. And the reason for 404, the teeth are bigger, they're longer, wider. This is more for professional use. And there again, round tooth chisel bit, and you get it in square. You can get some of these chains, you can get in semi chisel, which is kind of halfway between, and that works good in dirty wood if you're cutting on the ground and stuff. And so it doesn't get as dull as quickly as the others. But anyway, that's the basic chains that they use. And then I'll come back and show you some of the features of the chain again that I haven't gone over. Okay, well, the other way that you can identify chain if you have it, there's a number on the drive teeth. And this was number 91, and that means it's an Oregon 3/8 low profile chain. And the other chain, which I despise, but some people need them I guess, is these so-called safety chains. This is a 91 also, but the difference is it has this bar on here, and what that does is when the chain goes around the end of the bar, it actually sticks out and the tooth won't cut into the wood, and that way it won't kick back on you. So if you're a beginner or a weenie, that's for you. For me, I hang it up on the shelf in the garage. It's 3/8 here again. You know, you identify them by measuring the distance between these and dividing them by 2. And this is Oregon chain also. It's number 72. That's probably the most popular chain ever made. And the variants are round tooth, and you could buy this with a safety chain too, but round tooth or square tooth, semi chisel or full chisel. And same here, just like I say, 3/8, and then we get to the 404. Now you can see on this one that the gullet to the opening here is really far back, and I mean that's because it used to be way up here, but it's filed clear back to here. And some of the teeth are hardly anything left of them, but the amazing thing is they still cut really good. But the bad thing is that as the chain wears out, it stretches, and the distance between the drive teeth here stretches out too, and then it ruins the clutch drive. So anyway, that's the main ones that we're going to talk about today. And then we'll be back later and we'll show you the different parts of the chain here and explain what they do and stuff a little bit further. But this will give you an overview of the chains that are most commonly used today. Okay, well, we're just going to have a quick brief over what we've talked about and how to identify the chain, or if you don't have a chain, how to figure out which one you need. Now, the chains that they use today, these are all what they call chipper chains. It has a left-hand tooth and a right-hand tooth. So the most common is round tooth, meaning that the side of the cutter here is kind of a rounded shape. And of course then there's square cut too. I'll go into that just a little bit more here in a minute. So easiest way is to look on the driving dog of the chain here and see if there's a number on it. And the most common chain today, or the most common two of them, are Oregon and Stihl. And both have websites that you can look up their chain, and it'll cross over and show you the other numbers. So you'll be able to figure out what they mean and which one you need. So anyway, like I say, Oregon was the one that came out with the chipper chain, and everybody else copied it over time, and still by far the most common type of chain. The difference though, that there's lots of different types of cutting teeth, and like I say, I'll be talking about that in just a minute. So the first thing we want to do, if you don't have a number, it's an obsolete chain, then you can't find any crossover, take a measuring device here, go center to center on 3 rivets. Once you do that, then you divide that in 2, and then that way you'll know whether you got 1/4 inch, 3/8, 404, because they all have different lengths there. And there again, Oregon has an excellent website that shows all the dimensions and stuff on these things. Then the other way is, of course, with your bar here. And other thing that's important, once you find out what type of chain, you need to measure the drive dogs here. And the common sizes are 50 thousandths width, 58 thousandths width, and 63 thousandths width. Now the 63 is used mostly on bigger chains, like the 404 and stuff. But anyway, what you do is you measure the width here, and that'll tell you which one you're looking for. Then another way to figure it out, the clutch drive sprocket. Now here's one that the sprocket and the hub are all one, and this is replaceable, and that's what most saws use today. This is a cheapo saw. In fact, this is off Mr. Pooh, our favorite Poohland. But anyway, on this one, it tells you what size it is right there and how many drive pins it has. So this is a 7-tooth 3/8, and the width for the driving dogs is unimportant. It's wide enough it'll fit all of the different ones. And then on the bars, modern bars, this one doesn't have any markings on it, but modern bars will have the manufacturer's part number, tell you what width the groove is, tells you how many drive links and what pitch the chain is. So that's how you figure it all out. So we'll talk just a little bit about the pieces of the chain, but what we're going to be doing on our next week's video, we're going to be talking about chains that are pretty much obsolete, and we're going to talk about how the chain evolved from the real early stuff, which is pretty unusual stuff. And we're also going to talk about the development of bars, how they evolved in what we use today, which is the drive sprocket nose. Roller nose is my favorite. We'll talk about that in the next video. Okay, well, here's the components of a cutting tooth. This happens to be a round tooth chisel bit type. This is your rivets that hold the chain together, and then there'd be one as a strap that goes between them. And this is your top plate, which is angled back so that when it cuts, the sawdust can come out. This is a cutting edge right here, on the top cutting edge. And there again you can see it's rounded. Then you have this side cutting tooth here that actually sticks out to the side of the tooth. Down here is the bottom, that's called the gullet. And over here is your depth gauge. And what that does is it regulates the cutting height of the tooth here. And this is higher than here. And these need to be rounded. These are also referred to as rakers by most people, including myself. And then here's an example of the cutting depth here, from the top of the tooth here to the height here. That gives you your cutting depth, and most commonly 25 thousandths of an inch is the most common. And there again, going back to a round tooth here, the angle of the top plate here, perpendicular here to the actual chain itself, is about 35 degrees. Now there's different types of cutting teeth that will have different angles and stuff, and so like I say, the chisel bit is the most common. Then there's a semi-chisel, and what the difference is there is the cutting tooth doesn't go all the way across here, and the reason for that is that it's best for using in cutting dirty wood, like it's on the ground and stuff. It doesn't dull as easy, but it also doesn't cut as fast. And then there's also square cut, and so the part right here, instead of being rounded, is actually squared off, and the tooth here is actually pretty square too. So, and that's the most efficient, but that's what pros use, and it's a lot harder to file. You have to learn a whole new technique and use different files, and I don't do it because the round tooth chisel bit's the simplest and easiest to do, especially with the tools I have. So go back and see my older videos on stuff, how to sharpen the chains and whatnot. And let's see if you can see this on here or not, but you can see where the wear marks are here from the drive teeth on this. And that's just normal wear, but what happens, which accelerates it, is the drive teeth here, when the chain starts to wear out, it stretches, and so the distance between here and here is further apart. It doesn't match the notches in here, so it actually cuts away the metal. So even if a chain still cuts good and look good, it can still be wore out and make you have to replace the clutch. So anyway, so next week's exciting video, like I say, we're going to talk about obsolete chain sizes, how the chain evolved, how bars changed over the years, and more exciting vintage chainsaw BS. We'll see you in the next video. Vintage is best.